Okay, so I'm going to take a few minutes to discuss the field notes for Education 200, and they have classically given students issues. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about how to set up your field notes and what the purpose of those are. First thing you need to keep in mind is that field notes and your field journals are two different things. Remember, you have a set of journals that are assignments that I've given you, so you're going to write about technology and ethics and 4 or 5 other things, and then you have basically 3, 4, 5, however many you wish to write until you get to 8 total, including the assigned ones. Freebies, essentially, that you can write about any subject that you wish that you've observed within the classroom. So you may say, gee, this teacher did this one thing today and I don't understand what's going on. I sat in on a parent-teacher conference and the parent was really aggressive. What are some ways that the teacher dealt with that? Those sorts of things. So those are field journals, more reflective things where you take a look at the stuff that's happened during the day and just sort of piece it together, take a sort of critical perspective on that. Now, the field notes are a different beast entirely. And field notes are usually handwritten. If your handwriting is poor, please handwrite those and then type them up to put them in the journal or into your portfolio so I can understand what you wrote. But field notes are basically where you take a look at a particular student in a classroom. You don't even need to name them, okay? And if you do, use a pseudonym. But you take a look and say, oh, John over there, I really want to see what he does. And you set forward a time frame. You say, I want to see what he does for 20 minutes. I want to see what he does for 40 minutes. And usually that time frame is based on the length of a particular session that that student is engaged in. So for those of you that are teaching elementary school or working in elementary schools, you may find that your time frame is 15, 20 minutes. For those of you that are going to middle school or high school, you may find it 30, 40 minutes, okay? And then within that time frame, you will take notes on a particular time schedule. So you will say within this 20 minutes, every 3 minutes, I will write down what John is doing, okay? So here we are, we started at 10:30, John's sitting at his desk. 10:33, John is engaged in paying attention to a teacher. 10:36, John is fiddling with pencils in his desk. 10:39, John has gotten from his seat and is trying to talk to another student, And that's basically what you do. Now, obviously, you'll be a little more descriptive than that. But your field notes are basically where you're watching a child and trying to keep tabs on their behavior. So that's what field notes are. Now, the reason why you're doing those is because you're going to be doing them more frequently as you go down into the field of education. They will start to be sort of a launch point for your research projects for various classes in which you will be asked to observe a student and then write about that student's behaviors, what sort of growth stages you're seeing, et cetera, et cetera. So for instance, when I did a preschool placement, I sat in and watched a student, and some of the things that my co-student had noticed about a particular student were some physical issues that the student seemed to be having manipulating objects. Okay, and she was able to show that by saying, look, I watched this kid and wrote down every 2 minutes when he was working with these blocks, and I noticed this happened, and he dropped this block, and then he couldn't pick up this block, and so on. And then from there, she was able to put together a research paper based on her observations, okay, and then, of course, extra sources as well. So for me, I was able to watch a student who is clearly gifted, and that's sort of an overlooked segment of public education, but we were able to kind of take a look at some of the challenges he was facing as a gifted student when he was supposed to be learning the alphabet, but he's already reading on the 2nd grade level, okay, and so on in preschool. So then, what are some ways to keep him engaged would be a research paper you could write from that. Now, you don't need to worry about that research paper part for this class, but you need to do the field notes just to get an idea of how they work, how they function, and how you do it. So again, time frame, and then segments within that time frame. You're going to handwrite those out. For some of you that are teaching high school, your field notes will be a little bit longer, and that's just something based on the high school curricula than elementary school and preschool people. But One thing I don't want you to do, and one thing that you can't do with field notes, is make your time so absurdly long you only write down 3 things, okay? So if you have a student for an hour, you can't say, I'm going to observe what he's doing every 20 minutes. It has to be short time frames to be able to sort of create a scaffolding for you to say, this is an issue, right? Or this is an observation I've made in which the student has done this a certain number of times, okay? So you don't want to base a research project in the future on a student doing something once out of 2 times that you observed them within an hour period. Professor will kick you out of their office if you try that. So that's the basics of field notes. It's something that's a little bit trickier, but essentially that's how field notes work. Remember to keep those separate from your field journals. Those are 2 entirely different beasts.